She is the cradle of Western civilization, the birthplace of democracy, art, and philosophy. But construction and excavation threaten to destroy her past.
This could have been the disaster of the millennium.
One of the largest engineering and archaeological feats in Europe is digging through layers of ancient history, transforming Athens into a 21st century metropolis. Now, the Athens Subway on Modern Marvels. Greece. This beautiful mountainous country boasts hundreds of islands and 9,000 miles of shoreline. Athens, her capital, sits on Attica, a peninsula about 40 miles wide and 50 miles long. Ringed by mountains, high-rises share the Athens skyline with crumbling ancient structures. Here, the ancient and modern live side by side. Cars drive past classical triumphal arches that have survived millennia. Over the last 30 years, the population of Athens has doubled to nearly 4 million. 1.5 million people live in the dense, busy heart of the city, compounding its long-standing reputation for car pollution. Known to erode the smooth surface of marble, damaging ancient buildings and statues.
If you think of the classical antiquities of Athens from the 5th century BC, those antiquities suffered less, really, over 2,500 years than they did in 25 years of automobiles circulating in the city of Athens.
Many Athenians struggle to work on Line 1, Athens' antiquated urban train system. It is a single line, which only runs between Piraeus on the coast and Kephissia in the north.
Transport in an urban setting is vital to the quality of life of every major city. Athens is not an exception.
On top of this daily demand, the return of the modern Olympics to Athens in 2004 created an enormous influx of people who were required to use public transportation to and from the Olympic facilities.
Everybody was recognizing the need to improve the public transport system. Everybody knew that this could not be done by constructing more roads.
And Line 1 could not cope with the growing demands of a modern city. A modern solution was desperately needed.
Modern Olympics, which were reinvented at the end of the 19th century, only exist because there were ancient Olympics. And so in this interesting twist, it's ancient history, the ancient Olympics, that leads to the modern Olympics, that leads to the technological marvel of the Athens Metro.
The plan called for 2 new underground lines. Attica Metro's lines 2 and 3 would intersect with the existing Line 1, providing 12 more miles of line and 20 new stations.
The original schedule for constructing the Athens Metro, when the contract was signed with this French, German, and the Greek consortium, was for completion by the end of 1997.
In 1993, Athens residents watched as the 2 gigantic tunnel boring machines, or TBMs, nicknamed Metro Mouse, arrived to bore tunnels under one of the densest modern cities in the world. The TBMs would have to dig under some of the most recognizable architecture of the ancient world, through ground containing some of the oldest artifacts of Western civilization. Not everyone was pleased to see them.
There was tremendous debate and worry about whether it would work, whether these tunnel boring machines would chew up all of ancient Athens as they made their way underneath the streets of the modern city. Would they just be spitting out the refuse of thousands of years of culture as they inexorably marched toward, the next breakthrough?
The new lines would form a large cross, intersecting in the heart of the modern city, which had been built over layers of the ancient city. Several of the new stations were close to, or even inside, the old city wall, one of the richest archaeological sites in the world.
Since they've been inhabiting the same spot for thousands of years and living in exactly the same place, the archaeological history of Athens has built up like layer upon layer in a cake over the centuries. And all you need to do is take a teeny little slice in that cake, and you are immediately plunged into centuries, indeed millennia, of riches of archaeology.
The careful scientific archaeological excavations carried out during the Metro project give us a window into the ancient civilization. Along with coins, lamps, and pots, water pipes and roads tell us about Greece's engineering feats before it was annexed by Rome in 148 BC.
They had roadways with drainage, with surfacing, with tunnels and pipes to take away wastewater, and above all to bring fresh water, extending over an enormous amount of ground, and bringing to the people a quality of life that we never had this kind of physical evidence for in previous times. And so we see how there really was an ancient technological marvel. The modern technology let us see the application of the ancient technology in a way that gives a completely new dimension to our understanding of ancient Athenian life.
To build a metro in Athens at the end of the 20th century meant vast tracts of history had to be cut into. The archaeologists would have to perform rescue excavations, working within a limited time frame to map, record, and preserve thousands of artifacts across 18 sites, exposing over 40 square miles of ancient civilization.
Obviously is a very difficult marriage between the archaeologist and the engineers. The engineers want to do things as fast as they can. The archaeologists, of course, have their own time frame, which is opposite to the engineers.
But the new subway was desperately needed. Stations had to be built, and the Metro mouse cutting heads had to begin tunneling to construct the two new lines for Athens' most recent marvel. The ancient Parthenon took 16 years to complete. Ox carts hauled 22,000 tons of white marble 10 miles from Mount Pentelicon. The Athens subway will continue in a moment on Modern Marvels. At the end of the 20th century, Athens was a chaotic city with no clear urban plan and a struggling public transportation system. But it wasn't always this way. When Greece became an independent nation in the mid-19th century, tremendous efforts went into rebuilding the city while preserving her past. Otto I had been chosen as king, and in 1834, Athens was established as the capital city of a free Greece in honor of her historic greatness. As the king took the throne, a model city plan for Athens was developed. This Renaissance in Athens was part of a worldwide classical revival which became known as Neoclassicism.
One does not have to look very far to see the influence of ancient Greece. The founding fathers were all classical scholars.
Neoclassicism was the first truly national architectural style in the United States. It also inspired a revival of the Olympic Games. The first modern Olympiad took place in Greece in 1896, setting in motion the 20th century phenomena of the modern Olympics. Line 1 serviced these early games and continued to grow north, eventually reaching the suburb of Kifisia.
The history of Line 1 starts a number of years after the Greek Revolution, when the port city of Piraeus needed to be connected with Athens.
The first stage of Line 1 was constructed on or just below the surface. It was one of the earliest urban transport systems in the world when it opened in 1869.
When the lines first started running, it was running on a single track with steam engines. Slowly, the line expanded further north.
As it grew into the city, they used the time-honored cut and cover technique also used in Paris and New York. First, a large hole is excavated. Supporting walls are built. Then a roof is constructed before reinstating surface conditions. Towards the end of the 19th century, more and more people traveled to Athens to experience her classical glory. But the events of the 20th century overtook Athens' development. She was involved in both world wars and suffered under Italian and German occupation. She then endured a bitter civil war from 1946 to 1949, in which more than 1 million Greeks were killed. Fighting in rural areas led to a mass migration into Athens, causing social and economic chaos.
The explosion of the development started after the Second World War. The government did apply many regulations, and they just let people to build high buildings in the center, and that created many problems.
This caused an unplanned dense sprawl of poorly made housing. Late into the 20th century, Greece continued to struggle for stability until democracy was restored in 1974. Today, Greece is a parliamentary republic. The crowded city, a result of its recent past, further complicated the engineering of the new metro project. Lines 2 and 3 would radiate out in 4 directions from Syntagma Square, connecting the suburb with downtown Athens. It was impossible to open up huge cut-and-cover trenches in the middle of the city. Instead, the existing infrastructure forced Attica Metro to dig some of the central stations from the bottom up. A small service hole was dug, through which the giant station cavities were excavated under the bustling city. At interchange stations with Line 1, like Ammonia and Monastiraki, the old stations had to remain open and in operation throughout construction, creating even more of a challenge for the engineers. Outside of the city center, however, most of the new stations could be constructed in the same way as Line 1, using a modern version of the cut-and-cover technique. An open trench is excavated. The sides are retained by strutted or reinforced concrete pile walls. A waterproof membrane is then laid. Formwork follows. Finally, a slab roof is put in place, and the area above is backfilled. These stations then had to be joined by tunnels. 2 huge tunnel boring machines, or TBMs, specially designed by Mitsubishi in Japan, have been manufactured in France and were assembled on site. Each TBM was fitted with a 13-foot diameter cutting head, made up of 8 spokes with drag bits and single disc cutters. Costing over $20 million, each machine weighs 1,650 tons and is 459 feet in length. TBMs can excavate at depths of 20 to 92 feet below the surface. Deciding the depths of tunnels under Athens was crucial.
In building a metro, you always want to make it as shallow as you can be and be in stable ground, because of course the shallower the metro, the cheaper it is to have escalators and elevators and stairways.
But archaeologists were worried that tunneling at shallow depths could destroy historical evidence.
Antiquities in Athens can occur anywhere between 20 centimeters below the surface of the ground, up to 15 or even 20 meters where the bedrock begins.
To avoid buried antiquities, it was decided to operate the cutting heads under Athens at a depth of 66 to 82 feet. The TBM heads can rotate at a speed of 4 RPM and can cut up to 33 feet per day, leaving behind a 30-foot diameter tunnel, which is then supported by a ring of precast reinforced concrete segments, secured with a key segment to form a 28-foot lined tunnel. But the huge TBMs vibrate as they cut through solid rock and have been known to cause subsidence.
Subsidence or settlement in building any metro tunnel or even water tunnel, for example, or sewer tunnel, is normal, as long as it kept to a minimum and is monitored very carefully.
Archaeologists feared that vibrations could damage the ancient buildings as the TBMs approached the stations at the heart of the old city. The deepest underground system in the world is thought to be the Pyongyang Metro in North Korea. Tunnels are as deep as 393 feet below the surface. The Athens Subway will continue in a moment on Modern Marvels. The Athens Metro is one of the biggest engineering feats in Europe and the largest construction project in Greece. By 1995, as the frames of the stations neared completion, giant TBMs began cutting through solid rock to join them together, tunneling under ancient Athens, one of the oldest sites of civilization in the world.
The TBM is the preferred really method of tunneling if you can use it. So where you know that you have consistent ground for long distances.
The TBMs are computer operated, electrically powered, and hydraulically driven. Up to 250 men work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to man them in 3 shifts, contending with incredibly hot and humid conditions. Work only stops when the temperature rises above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. As the cutters break up the soil and rock, the debris is removed via conveyor belts, automatically loaded onto trains, and transported through tunnels to points where it is raised to the surface and taken away for disposal. As TBMs drive through Athens substratum towards already prepared station sites, their arrival generates much excitement. Each time a TBM breaks into a station with pinpoint accuracy, there are celebrations at its safe arrival. But the extraordinary geological conditions under Athens are very unpredictable. Despite surveys and hundreds of boreholes, in a space of 33 feet, the geology can change from hard rock to soft rock, or even shale. Because of this inconsistency, tunneling methods had to be adapted to suit conditions. For a section of Line 2, another machine specially designed to deal with softer rock was brought in. Called an open standing reputation for car pollution, known to erode the smooth surface of marble, damaging ancient buildings and statues.
If you think of the classical antiquities of Athens from the 5th century BC, those antiquities suffered less, really, over 2,500 years than they did in 25 years of
Greece. This beautiful mountainous country boasts hundreds of islands and 9,000 miles of shoreline. Athens, her capital, sits on Attica, a peninsula about 40 miles wide and 50 miles long. Ringed by mountains, high-rises share the Athens skyline with crumbling ancient structures. She is the cradle of Western civilization, the birthplace of democracy, art, and philosophy. But construction and excavation threaten to destroy her past.
This could have been the disaster of the millennium.
One of the largest engineering and archaeological feats in Europe is digging through layers of ancient history, transforming Athens into a 21st century metropolis. Now, the Athens Subway on Modern Marvels. Here, the ancient and modern live side by side. Cars drive past classical triumphal arches that have survived millennia. Over the last 30 years, the population of Athens has doubled to nearly 4 million. 1.5 million people live in the dense, busy heart of the city, compounding its long-standing